Hi folks, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. My name's Jim. Thanks for joining me. I'd like to do a reading update for Monday, October 7th, 2024. Here's what I've finished, some new acquisitions, TBRs, active reading list. We'll just give you a quick update, and I hope you all are reading some good books right now. Let me just start with a couple new acquisitions. These are additions to my Great Books of the Western World Franklin Library edition, and it's Montaigne Essays Volume 1 and 2. There is a Volume 3 of this book, and I did not get that. So this was a eBay auction. I think it was an auction that I won, and there was only the first two volumes available. And these are leather-bound copies, and they have the gold foil on the ends, and these sort of silk moire end papers. And these aren't really illustrated so much, but they do have some, decorative ornaments to them. And here's what the contents page looks like. And you've got some nice drop caps. So I like the use of the second color. The books are in very good condition. There's a little faint odor to them that's I wish wasn't there, but I'll live with it. Hopefully that'll kind of maybe I'll clean them and it'll acclimate to our own environment here. That sometimes happens with books. But anyway, this is nice. I got these at a pretty good price point. I'm fairly cheap when it comes to this. I can't spend a fortune on these books, but I do love Montaigne. I've read the Modern Library edition of his essays, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the Florio translation from the Elizabethan age. I could not track that down. I looked for it. I have a feeling I gave it away, but so be it. That's fine. I already read it. I do have the original Great Books of the Western World, Montaigne, and then also he's in the 1990 second edition. But I discovered something very interesting about these Montaigne editions, and that is the translator. So the translator here is Donald Frame. The translator of this edition, which is a reprint of the 1952 first edition, is Charles Cotton, edited by W. Carew Hazlitt. Different translators. Now, in another video, I compared the translations between the first edition and the second edition. But I was not aware that these Franklin libraries, which were issued in between the first and the second editions, these came out in the late 70s, early 80s. Now they're using the translator, Donald Frame, that they used in the second edition. So this intrigues me quite a bit. You've got this Montaigne translator is in the second edition, not the first edition. Interesting. I wonder how many other of these works in translation used the new translators that they used in the second edition. Was this a stepping stone on Britannica's part to sort of pave the way for the second edition? Anyway, I did not expect that. I just thought these were basically taking lock, stock, and barrel the first edition Great Books of the Western World set and just putting nice covers on them. Yeah, interesting. I don't have any other works to compare, but maybe down the line I'll get a few more volumes and see what's going on with that. But anyway, these have a lot of nice shelf appeal, and it's good at least to have Essays Volume 1 and 2. Remember, this gives you a sense of scale. There's one more of these, so imagine another volume of thickness compared to this thickness. All the essays fit in this volume thanks to the double column, small point size Whereas these, which are more, they sort of your normal single column width, bigger point size, these take up 3 volumes to get through them all. But anyway, maybe down the line I'll find volume number 3, and I'll have a whole set of Montaigne. So anyway, that was a new acquisition. In my other reading update is I finally I finished The Rebels by John Jakes. And this was part of his bicentennial series, which came out in the 1970s. And I found it in a little free library. I can't show it to you because I just returned it to the little free library this morning on my dog walk. And I was happy to finish it. I cannot remember if I read The Rebels when I was a kid or a teenager. I'm pretty sure I read one of those in the bicentennial series. And it was probably either the first one or the second one. This was volume 2, and it's a historical fiction of the American Revolution. It features the protagonist, Philip Kent, who is an immigrant from France, and he's living in Boston, and he gets involved in the American Revolution and is like traipsing around with the Continental Army. And we have cameos by people like George Washington and Mad Anthony Wayne. And we see several battle scenes. There's also a subplot involving his wife. And I don't want to spoil things, but it's sort of a romance plot. There's suspense, there's tragedy, and so forth. The other major plot line involves a character, if I remember his name was Judson Fletcher, and he's from Virginia, a slave-owning family, and we have a set piece early in the book of a slave rebellion, and this character, Judson, is like a black sheep of the family, more of a rebel, and doesn't get along with his father, and he gets on the outs with him, and then he ends up at the Continental Congress filling in for his good brother. I forget why that brother can't participate, but anyway, Judson's a heavy drinker, a womanizer. He shoots a man in a duel. He does not, he's kind of a loser, fails a lot, and doesn't last long with the Continental Congress. Kind of wanders away from that, back towards Virginia, and some things happen that I don't want to give away. But he does then get interested in following an old friend of his, George Clark, of Lewis and Clark fame, who is heading out to the Northwest Territories, like in the continental colonial days. That would have been like beyond Pittsburgh, in the like Ohio and that part of the Midwest, Indiana. Also like down into like the Ohio Valley, basically, like Kentucky and places like that. And he's gonna, do some missions related to the revolution and so forth. And I don't want to spoil the plot for you, but like that's kind of where that character ends up. And then at the end of the book, Jake sort of, in a kind of a nice, interesting way, sort of weaves those two plot lines together at the end. I don't want to spoil it for folks. It's a good read. It's a fun read. It's kind of trashy. It's a bit of a pot boiler. I just kept thinking, it's like I'm watching a TV miniseries, and it did get turned into a TV miniseries, which I haven't watched. But it's probably on YouTube. Everything else seems to be on YouTube. But I'm glad I finished it. I was surprised how long it took me to read it. It was about 524 pages. But the chapters are very easy to read. Like it's all plot. And I don't know, it didn't quite hold my interest for like sustained periods of time. Like I would read a chapter or a subchapter or two or three, and then park it for a while. And other books sort of cut the line, and that's what happens in my reading life, at least. Other books took precedence, whereas this was just more of like as one of my viewers called it, a palate cleanser. So I'm glad to finally finish it. It was kind of fun to discover it in a little free library, and in the area that I live in here in Southeast Pennsylvania, we are suffused with colonial history and history of the Revolutionary War. I mean, I am only a few miles from the Brandywine battlefield, and the Battle of Brandywine is covered in the book. So that was of deep interest to me. And we're not so far, it's a short drive, 25 minutes from Valley Forge. Another section of the book talks about, that wintering in Valley Forge. And we get some good coverage of different important battles in the war. So, yeah, it was a fun read. I don't think it's heavy-duty historical fiction. It's not. This ain't War and Peace. But it was still a fun read. If anyone else has read John Jakes' Bicentennial series, weigh in and let me know what you think of it and what were your favorite novels in the series. So that's that. Let's talk a little bit also about some ebook reading that I've been doing and on my Kobo Aura reader. I note that I saw in the news that Fredric Jameson had passed away. Fredric Jameson was a Marxist literary and cultural theorist and critic. And he wrote some pretty popular books for that like sort of small realm of literary theory that, he was one of the big names in theory. I'll just put it that way. And the one I was dipping into is this called The Ancients and the Postmoderns on the Historicity of Forms by Fredric Jameson. And this had been lurking in the archive of the e-reader. And I took a peek at it. It's not a book that I plan on reading cover to cover. I basically gave it a hard skim. So I'm not even going to count it as a finished book. But it was first published in 2015. And this struck me as being, I felt like he was trying to sort of connect like postmodernism with like ancient stuff, but I don't think that framework really held over the course of the book. It really just read more like extended review essays of stuff that he was reading or had read and watched. So it's interesting is how he covers the world of art, the world of film, the world of literature, philosophy, things like that. So he's got chapters in here on Rubens and history, Wagner as dramatist and allegorist, transcendence and movie music in Mahler. That's the one chapter that I read the most closely because I listened to a lot of Mahler and I wanted to see what he had to say about it. And it was kind of interesting. He goes on a lot of tangents, but he's a very learned guy and just has like kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of things. But he seemed to write about Mahler's music with a lot of insight. You can tell he's listened to a lot of Mahler and appreciates it. I don't know what my huge takeaway from it was, but I guess he's trying to situate Mahler in like the period and all the stuff, all the chapters in this book. And this is sort of Fredric Jameson's wheelhouse. Was he kind of connects form and content to history and class struggle and like the kinds of things that Marxist theorists are interested in. So he looks a lot at the history of form and so forth, and has interesting things to say about that. But it's impossible for me to summarize it because these literary theorists, they're just they like to talk, and they're hard to like distill into something simple. But he's trying to situate Mahler in his period, and in a sense, and like kind of account for some of the strange quirks of his style, and so forth, and talk about his influences and whatnot. In part 2 of the book, he talks about a Greek filmmaker that I'm not familiar with, but sometimes I like to read these types of books because it opens some doors for me. And I'll probably pronounce the name wrong. Angelopoulos and Collective Narrative. Angelopoulos and Collective Narrative. History and Elegy, and Sokurov, another filmmaker. Decalogue as Decameron. Decalogue, I think, might be a TV series. Again, I skimmed a lot of this stuff. Then he has a chapter on Eurotrash or Regiopere, Altman, Robert Altman, and the National Popular or Misery and Totality. And most of that chapter is devoted to the film Shortcuts, which I have seen. I saw it when it came out. And it's an interesting interweaving of 9 different Raymond Carver short stories, but it's very much an adaptation, so he took a lot of liberties with it. That was kind of an interesting chapter. A Global Neuromancer, which is about the William Gibson novel, the sort of cyberpunk novel Neuromancer, which I found recently at either a library sale or I think at a library sale, and it's on my TBR. But I just skimmed that chapter. Realism and Utopia in The Wire, the television series, a series that I haven't watched. I don't watch a lot of TV, but people said that was one of the best ones ever. The Clocks of Dresden, Counterfactual Socialisms, and Dirty Little Secret. So that is Fredric Jameson. And again, I just gave that a skim. Just because he was on my mind, because I heard he passed away, had a nice long life. The book he's most famous for is this one, Postmodernism, or The Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism. And this I read in the paperback edition shortly after it came out, and it's, I think, his most famous book. Probably his landmark. He also wrote an early book called Marxism and Form, and a small detour here, but I don't remember if I've read that one. Like, one thing about Jameson is he's sort of known as a Marxist theorist, but he's very steeped in Hegel. And if any of you have tried to read Hegel, you know how like frighteningly difficult his style is. Well, Jameson is like sort of in the same neighborhood as that. He's been influenced by that, and he's all very dialectical thinker. So he's not easy to read. So I don't think I got very far with Marxism and Form. But the other book he's pretty famous for is, I think it's called The Political Unconscious. And I read that in grad school, if I remember correctly. It might have been an assigned text. Or all that stuff was in the air in the late 80s when I was in grad school, and it either was recommended to me or assigned to me, and I picked up a copy and read it. I no longer have it. I did a big unhaul of a lot of theory, purged them, but that was an interesting book where he's looking again at the history of forms of narrative, and I remember he had interesting readings of people like Balzac, maybe Conrad, but it's been a while since I read it. But anyway, this one, Postmodernism, I read this because at the time, postmodernism was the thing, right? That was the trendy thing. In theory, in culture, in pop culture, it was all over. You couldn't get away from postmodernism. And the name postmodernism always rankled me. And one thing I struggled with was I couldn't put my finger on what it really was. It seemed like anything could be called postmodern. And what made postmodernism different from modernism, and so forth. Well, this book tried to answer that, and he covers again some interesting artifacts. You know, he doesn't just talk about literature. He talks about Andy Warhol. He talks about Frank Gehry, the architect, and, you know, other stuff that I can't even remember. But he helped me to grasp what postmodernism might be, or at least I got into his definition of it. I thought, okay, and he's understanding postmodernism as a kind of um, of what he calls late capitalism. It's like the forms of culture that sort of interrelate or well up out of or grow out of a certain socioeconomic period of time. That's what he's most famous for. And when I did some research on Jameson after he passed, I think it's Duke University Press was the publisher of the Postmodernism book. They said that's their most popular title, their best-selling title, which shocked me that a work of theory like that could be that popular. I mean, Duke University Press doesn't probably sell a whole ton of books, but like to be number one on that publisher is rather impressive. So I assume people are still reading it and referring to it and citing it. If you're interested in postmodernism, you might want to check it out. Probably an easier read would be Terry Eagleton, his take on postmodernism. I don't know if I've read so many Eagleton books, they all run together, but he might be like a better first step because he's much easier to understand stylistically than Jameson. But if you want to do a deep dive, Jameson might be worth your while. For probably 99% of the people watching this video, he's not for anybody. And I can't really recommend literary theory anymore. I think I've been there and I've done that. It's diminishing returns. But he was an important figure in that world. And then also I've been dipping into some other books on here. The Restored Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. I usually read like a handful of pages at a time before I give up or fall asleep. But, you know, slowly working my way through that. Also, Richard Brautigan. There's a book here of, I think, 3 of his novels. Well, this is his book, Dreaming of Babylon. And it's kind of like a pastiche of like a private eye novel. That's what I gather so far. But I'm not too far into it. But it's written in that breezy, witty Richard Brautigan style that it's quirky, it's fun, it goes down easy. I like Richard Brautigan a lot, but this is probably not one of his better books, at least not so far. But in other news, I'm still slogging through the Metaphysics by Aristotle. If I sat down and really dedicated to it, I probably could finish it in a few days, but again, it's slow going, but so be it. This is a book that I found in a little free library that I picked up, and I'm liking it a lot so far. Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Does anyone know this book? It's, I think, part of a series that she was working on but didn't finish. The Earthseed books. Parable of the Sower was the first, Parable of the Talents. And I think there was another one that was being planned on, but she didn't finish it before passing away. So this is Octavia Butler, a sci-fi author, fantasy, I guess you'd call it too. I've been meaning to get around to reading something by her, and I'm glad I finally am because I'm enjoying this. I'm not too far into it yet, but what I'm getting, it's reading a little bit like what we call cli-fi or climate fiction or climate change fiction. It's what it's reminding me of, and I could be way off because I'm maybe not far enough into it, but I'm getting a little bit of vibes of the Madame trilogy by Margaret Atwood. So this is sort of in a world that's kind of gone to hell in like Los Angeles area, and these people are sort of surviving as best they can, and it's written in journal entries by our narrator, and it's weaving in sort of like excerpts from this almost like a religious text. So I don't know a whole lot about it yet, but let me read the blurb on the back. It'll make more sense than I'm trying to do. When global climate change and economic crises lead to social chaos in the early 2020s, this is another reason why I love it, is because it's like, this was written, I think, in the 90s, and it's set in our day and age, right? The 2020s. California becomes full of dangers, from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren Olamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where any vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyper-empathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Sometimes I think I suffer from that. Precocious and clear-eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more, the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. That's a nice blurbage there. I'm going to move this one, now that I'm finished with the John Jakes, I think I'm going to move Parable of the Sower to one of the front burners. And it reads easy. I think I can get through it fast if I just, dedicate to it. I'm also continuing my read through of the collected fiction of Borges, and I have finished the first collection, which was called A Universal History of Iniquity, which was published in 1935. So I read all the stories in there, and now I'm getting into fictions, 1944, The Garden of Forking Paths, and now you're getting into some heavyweight Borges, like Tlan Ukbar Orbis Tertius. That's next up, a story I've read before, but a lot of these are going to be more familiar to me. Also, this was, I think, a Goodwill buy from months ago. Hesiod, translated by Richard Lattimore. I'm enjoying this quite a bit. I'm currently reading The Works in Days. This is a very nice illustrated edition. I'll show you what it looks like with the dust jacket off. Nice. And there are some illustrations on the inside, like this. So it's not just the illustrations I like the translation a lot. And I have not done any kind of sustained reading of Hesiod before. So this feels like important ancient Greek work, and I'm glad to be reading it. Maybe have more to say about it once I finish it. This is another book I got months ago. I think this was a book sale find. And it's Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. And this one's going into the onto the front burner too. This just seems very fitting for October, Halloween month, to read a haunted house story. Also, I'm making some headway into this signed first edition of Joyce Carol Oates, You Must Remember This. And this was the one I got for $6 at my local used bookstore. There's Joyce's autograph. And this is set in upstate New York. I'm 5 chapters into it, so I'm up to page 57. But I'm really savoring her prose style, her scene setting, her character development. And it's a family story. It's got a young female protagonist coming of age. And there's this uncle who's a boxer. And yeah, so far I'm just think it's excellent. But we'll see how it wears as we move through. But I'll probably also make more headway with that book now that John Jakes is out of the way. And then this has been just on the shelf staring at me wanting to be read for years, and that's Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And this is a book club edition. It's got the deckled edges. Very nice dust jacket. One of her classic books. And I think I've only read 2 Toni Morrison novels. There's Sula was my first read, and Beloved. And I've read Recitatif, which is a long short story by her. I've taught that story a few times. But Song of Solomon is just something I'm interested in. I'll read you the dust jacket copy. 3 years after her brilliantly acclaimed Sula, Toni Morrison gives us a novel of large beauty and power, creating a magical world out of 4 generations of black life in America. It is a world we enter in the present through Macon Dead Jr., known as Milkman, son of the richest black family in a Midwestern town. We enter it on the day of his birth, the first black baby allowed to be born at Mercy, popularly called No Mercy Hospital, the day on which the lonely insurance man Robert Smith, poised in blue silk wings, attempts to fly from the steeple of the hospital, a black Icarus looking homeward. We see Milkman growing up in his father's money-haunted, death-haunted house with his silent sisters and strangely passive mother, and we watch him beginning to move outward through his profound love and combat with his friend, guitar, through guitar's mad and loving commitment to the Band of Seven, the secret avengers called the 7 Days, through Milkman's exotic and then imprisoning affair with his love-blind cousin, Hagar, and through his unconscious apprenticeship to the one person in his family who was open, unfettered, whole, the exiled one, his unkept, mystical, bootlegging Aunt Pilot, with a brass box for an earring with no navel. Pilot, who looks like a tall black tree and who saved his life before he was born. And we follow him as he strikes out alone, drawn away from home, south, to the place his father came from, by the promise of buried gold, moving first toward adventure and then, as the unspoken truth about his family and his own buried heritage announces itself, toward an adventurous and crucial embrace of life. This is a novel in which mystery unfolds on mystery, revelation on revelation, in which our vision of what we have seen turns, changes, and takes shape again, transformed. It is a novel expressing with passion, tenderness, and a magnificence of language the mysterious primal essence of family bond and conflict, the feelings and experience of all people wanting and striving to be alive. Yeah. Song of Solomon. I've read the first chapter and I'm already liking it. I just feel like you're in the hands of a master writer already. She just feels like she's in full command of her characters and her material and her setting. And I look forward to getting deeper into that one. That's Song of Solomon. I'll give you an update as I keep reading it. Those are the books I'm sort of actively reading right now. And of course, there's some other ones I probably left off the list, but I have waxed on too long here. Let me know what you've been up to reading-wise. If you have any questions or comments about these books, feel free to weigh in. It's always fun chatting about books with you. I hope you're reading some good ones. Thanks for watching.